Imagine that you have travelled for 20 hours. You get to your hotel only to find that you can't get into your room. But not only can't you get into your room, you can't actually get to your room. Now, it kind of seems like some weird skit out of Fawlty Towers, and you're dealing with Basil and Sybil just aren't interested in your problem. And you talked to Basil and Sybil quite a lot before you actually made your booking, and they just told you everything that you wanted to know. Now, the problem is that this is exactly what happened to my friend Karen. And the reason that she couldn't get to her room was because she couldn't get her wheelchair to go up the 3 flights of stairs that she would have needed to get to her room. Now, when she made her booking, she talked to Basil and Sybil, and she even went to the point of explaining to them that she wanted to get an electric buggy or electric scooter delivered to the hotel, and would that be okay if they delivered it the day before she arrived, and would they be okay with that? Yes, no problems at all. Is your hotel accessible? Yes, of course it is. But what does accessible mean to different people? To Basil and Sybil, accessible meant that it was accessible to Times Square and that there was a subway station just down the next block. To Karen, accessible meant, can I get in there using my wheelchair? Now, this happened back in 2012, and back in 2012 I just also happened to be in New York. And so I caught up with Karen once she'd found somewhere that she was able to actually stay in. And I spent 3 days with Karen, and it was just the most mind-blowing experience that I had. If we wanted to go and get a cab to go somewhere, you and we could have just walked out onto the street, hailed a cab, and away we go. But in a city the size of New York, at that time, there were 100 accessible cabs. So one day we waited 2.5 hours for a taxi to arrive. You can't go on the subway in New York at that time, because although you might have been able to get onto the subway at that station, you might have not been able to even get out of the subway at the station that you actually wanted to stop at. So you needed to use buses. Now, if you can picture a busy New York bus, and it pulls into the bus stop, and they go, there's somebody in a wheelchair. They have to lower the bus down, they have to put a ramp out. The driver has to get out of his seat, and he has to help the person get onto the bus. You have to do like a 16-point turn to manoeuvre your wheelchair into a position so that you can be strapped in. Not to mention the people who have been asked to get out of the seat so that they could go and sit somewhere else so that you could get your wheelchair strapped in. Imagine the humiliation. And it was humiliating. Now, don't get me wrong, I had a fabulous 3 days in New York with Karen. Absolutely amazing, and there were some very good points. We went to the not the Eiffel Tower, because that's the wrong city, isn't it? We went to the Empire State Building, and people were queued up down the block waiting to get in. With Karen, we got to queue jump. And we didn't get to just queue jump, we got to queue jump, we got to the front of the queue, we were taken into our very own elevator and taken to the top floor, and fabulous, it was great. But, you know, that's the benefits are fairly shortcomings when you think about the barriers that you have to be able to get over to get there. So this trip was where I discovered accessible tourism, or inclusive tourism as we now call it, and that's where I started my journey on the accessible tourism path. Now, accessible tourism, you're all thinking, probably doesn't mean that much. It's actually 25% of tourism worldwide. And accessible tourism in Australia is bigger than the China market. And look at how much money we throw at the China market, to try and get them to come to Australia. Well, we've got that market at our own doorstep. In the first quarter of 2017 alone, this market was worth $8 billion to the Australian domestic tourism market. Now, I go out and talk to a lot of operators because my plan is to help operators understand what this market's about. And of course, the first thing they jump to is, no, inclusive tourism or accessible tourism, wide doors, ramps, too hard, costs too much money, don't want to know about it. But it's actually only 8% of this entire market that use wheelchairs. And the other 92% don't necessarily need that. Why is this market so big? I hear you ask. Almost 20% of Australians have a disability. We're an ageing population, and that's a worldwide phenomenon. 50% of people over the age of 55 will have some form of disability, whether they identify with it or not. So basically, every single one of us is just growing into our disability. It's just a matter of time, and ain't that a cheery thought? But it's true. You know, I wear glasses. I've got a disability. I don't identify with it, but I've got glasses. So when I go to a restaurant and I want to sit down and read something, I want it to be in a large print. It's not hard to do that. They're the sort of things that everyday tourism operators can do, and everyday retail outlets can do, to make life easier for people with disabilities and for older people. And if you think about it, all the other people that might have some kind of special requirement, or might just appreciate something to be a little bit easier for them. A family travelling with a pram. They don't want to have to try and get that kid up a flight of stairs. They just want to be able to go up a ramp. So my job is to help businesses understand the market, adapt to their businesses to get into the market, to tap into the market, and in turn to provide a great experience for everybody, not just their able-bodied guests, but everybody. And by doing that, we are creating a much better world, a much happier world, and a much more inclusive society for all. And let me just leave you with one little thought. The only minority group on this entire planet that any one of us can join, just like that, is people with disabilities.